Hey, everybody, this is Vince Miller. Welcome to a podcast on truth, courage, and civility in a divided world. And I'm going to be up front. This podcast is a bit of an experiment. I don't know exactly where it's headed. I know this. It's not going to replace Project 23, our daily journey through Scripture and weekly studies in God's Word. But I want this to be a little different. I'm kind of calling it Faith and State. I want it to be a forum for honest conversation where faith isn't sidelined and politics isn't idolized and God's truth gets a seat at the table. And right now, this is audio only. We don't have the space, the gear, or the budget for video, but I'd rather start small than not start at all. What you're going to hear is you're going to hear a conversation between a father and a son-in-law. That is me and Elliot Engen. You're going to hear a conversation between a pastor and a politician. That's me and my son-in-law, who is the Minnesota State House rep. You're going to hear a conversation between an older generation, that's me, and a younger generation, that's Elliot. And, I want your voice in this whole thing. I want you to share your thoughts, drop a comment, and let's shape this together. So let's just dive in. Truth, courage, and civility in a divided world. Hey, everybody, I'm Vince Miller. So good to be with you. I'm sitting tonight with my son-in-law.
Yeah.
Actually, Elliot Engen.
Pretty crazy, man. Would you have thought that this would be the type of setting that we'd be in? When I met you when I was 14, 15 years old?
No,
a little different.
Anyway, Elliot is one of our house reps, and I am obviously pastor. And we're just going to have a conversation about truth, courage, civility in this life, and we're going to lean into a little faith and state conversation, predominantly because we live in a time maybe we should talk about that, right?
Well, I think everybody's heard that old saying, there's a separation between church and state. But nowadays, when politics is a religion to a lot of people, and religion is not reflected within politics, we need to separate them, or unseparate them rather, because they're one and the same nowadays. You have to vote for the values that you wish to see reflected in this world. And I think it's a really important conversation to have, and having biblical leadership through our elected leadership is the only way to do so.
Well, you said something to me just the other day after the event of us being at the state capitol for a vigil for Charlie Kirk. And I looked out and I saw a lot of college students.
Right.
And I noticed pretty quickly that the younger generation doesn't necessarily see the separation of church and state like my generation or the generation before me. What I noticed, and you can speak to this a little bit, what I noticed was that there was a deep integration of those two things.
Right.
And we started talking about just even the word politics. Why don't you define that for our audience?
Yeah, politics is simply the way that people govern themselves. It's the way that we create order out of people. And, politics is annoying nowadays. People hear that word and they immediately think gross, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. If we were to have that biblical leadership, that spiritual base as our guiding light through politics, I think it wouldn't be a gross word. I don't think that it would come with as much division and tragedy as it has recently. And so I think you're spot on, though. Our generation sees it as the same thing because without that spiritual lens, you get a bad form of politics. And so they need to be conjoined as one again, and that's really important nowadays.
Well, that strikes me because I think that is some of the reason that the older generation probably has a hard time connecting with the younger generation. I mean, when we were there at the state capitol and I saw that and I listened to how people were communicating how they experienced the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I suddenly learned why there was such a barrier between me and a younger generation, or the church and a younger generation. It's that they don't see They see those as one and the same. They see them as integrated. And if we give that word politics a dirty name from our generation, we are going to miss the opportunity to see how beautiful the integration of our faith with our politics could work. Because I'm just going to let you know, I think, I agree. I have always thought that the way that we govern our life, our politics, obviously is determined by God's truth, the Bible, but the same way we live that out in the public square. And so it should be integrated not only in private, but in public, and we gotta be okay with that.
Well, you hear it all the time. The things you don't talk about around the Thanksgiving dinner table with families, politics, religion, anything like that. It's just off limits because you could end up creating some division where there shouldn't be any. But I'm sorry, if we're going to avoid those two topics, which are on everybody's mind right now, we're not actually tapping into the cultural baseline of the day, the heartbeat of what it drives people to feel certain ways. I mean, I don't know if you've heard this, but so many people have come to me and said, I didn't know Charlie personally, but this one feels as if I did, right? When we're referencing Charlie Kirk, obviously. I think they feel that way because he gave voice and fought for the values that our generation, believed in, or many in our generation believe in, but they weren't allowed to say for fear of retribution. And it wasn't a societal norm to be able to push back against some of the left's insanity, which is also synonymous with anti-biblical truth leadership. So you need to conjoin those two topics. Otherwise, you're missing the ball completely. And conservatives can't, just rely on their own politics without it first being grounded in that Christianity, which all morality drives from. So that's my interpretation of it. And as we've seen, secularism rise and folks who identify as religious, as that decreases, we're also experiencing more tension within our everyday politics.
So that's kind of, I think, where I come in is, I guess I, as a pastor or as a author speaker, I wrestle with this tension of how do I, Elliot, regulate myself in such a way to be able to speak into the topics of politics at the same time, not self-regulate so much that I take myself out of the public square. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
of course.
I struggle with that all the time. And I was actually at an event this last weekend in New York, and I was there within 24 hours of Charlie's assassination, and I said something at the event, predominantly because I felt like no one was going to say anything. I mean, you got a few hundred Christian guys there who are all thinking about it, but no one's saying anything about it. They're probably whispering.
Elephant in the room.
Totally elephant in the room, and I spoke up about it. I talked for like 20 minutes, like before I ever said a word.
I'm so glad you called me at like 11 o'clock and we had an hour-long conversation about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really important that you share as to why we're having this discussion in the first place as well.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately where this stemmed from, I think.
Yeah, we're having this discussion today because I, as a Christian communicator and pastor, have felt convicted that we have self-regulated too much.
Yeah.
We have you use the word self-censored. Yeah, I like that word. It's pretty good. So we self-censored too much, which I'm really concerned about because we should engage this conversation, especially if we want to reach the public arena where lost people are.
Correct.
And this goes for people on both sides of the aisle. So I want to reach both people. They're all God's people. We just want to persuade them to the truth. But if we're going to engage it, we have to speak out about it.
You just described Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. True. Yeah, I can see
both
that.
sides.
Yeah. Of course, and I think to one side of the aisle, he was very polarizing because he stepped in some messes, right? At the same time, to another side, they're like watching him do what they wish they could do. Do you see what I'm talking about? So it's how do we navigate this terrible tension? But I know what it did for me when I saw what I saw on social media regarding Charlie. Very humbling, by the way, and very gave just deep pause to my soul.
Yeah.
Like I was disturbed by that event. At the same time, it gave rise to some courage in me to say, we need to be talking about these things. Right. We can't lean away from them. And here's my concern, actually, is not just to lean into it once for 1 week.
No, it's for good. And it's on every issue. It has to be. Like you said earlier, the conjoining of religion and politics is there. And if we're simply avoiding it for sake of making sure people don't feel offended, or we don't alienate certain crowds, we might end up self-censoring to the point of not speaking about anything. We're not speaking about anything that's actually on people's minds.
Right.
And so it is essential that we do this. And I felt that exact same thing, and so many others have as well. I know there were churches across America that just saw a massive spike in attendance because of Charlie Kirk's death. And we should all strive to be that. But if the churches aren't talking about that at all, if they're avoiding the topic writ large because they don't want to alienate a couple folks in the crowd, that's what I think is leading people to not want to attend church in the first place.
Yeah, or I would add to that as a pastor that they don't want to alienate butts in seats or bucks in wallets.
Yep.
And I think it's time to get over that. In fact, as I was experiencing this moment up in front of this retreat, it was a men's retreat. There were probably about 350 guys there. I found myself trying to figure out, how do I navigate the conversation?
Right.
But it forced me to think, and that was a good thing. But I felt so compelled to say something that I was really surprised by how it was met with people. And I could tell that a lot of people, in fact, I would say most people, were really happy that I said something.
Well, you shared with me, wasn't it like a third of the attendees came up to you afterwards and said thank you?
Yeah.
Even if it was a whisper?
Yeah. It was interesting, though. It was kind of like, hey, Vince, thanks for saying something.
Like we don't have to whisper that.
I know,
that's the self-censorship, right?
Yeah. I would probably say 175 guys came up to me afterwards and said, hey, thanks for saying something. But they did it on the side, but they're self-censoring still.
Yep.
But someone's got to lead the way to help them to break through that and push through the self-censoring. And I would say, from my standpoint, push through the passivity to say and do nothing, because we've done that too long. And by the way, it doesn't work. And I'm not talking about being angry. I'm not talking about taking up arms right now. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just engaging the dialogue and being less scared of it.
That's exactly what Charlie did. And you started with a word that I think we need to dive into, civility. The term civility and bipartisanship and coming together, all of those kind of buzzwords are thrown around. And you've heard after this tragic event that both sides need to tone down the rhetoric. That only works if we recognize the same truth, that we're grounded in the same reality. And I'm sorry, we're not right now. If we can't, find a way to amicably agree on how many genders there are, it's tough to find common ground. But that doesn't mean that we should stop saying truth because it might lead to more discourse and tension. And anything that's worth saying will do so. But I think Charlie is, you called him a polarizing figure or somewhat divisive. Mm-hmm. It's only divisive nowadays.
Right.
He wasn't divisive 10 years ago.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was interesting, right?
And that's what happens when we don't engage in that dialogue. It becomes more divisive to say truth.
Yeah, so let's take that a little bit further.
Yeah.
Because I think that's fascinating what you just said. We talk about this word bipartisanship. So for the people out there that don't understand what that word means, can you please explain it?
Yeah, it just means left and right coming together.
Yeah, left and right.
Whether on policy or just, anything. They're nice to each other.
Right, exactly. Being polite about, and saying we're going to come together on this issue. But you're also saying that it's hard to be bipartisan when truth does eventually divide.
Right. I mean, we were called out of order on the House floor for referencing somebody who is a biological male as a male. I mean, they shut that down. It was not allowed to be spoken on the House floor, and they wanted to pass legislation that reflected the same in our society. So a literal stifling of truth because of subjective means. And I think what we're experiencing right now in our entire culture and politics is simply what happens when humans try to play the role of God, right? It doesn't end up working out very well. But in other ways, too, I mean, the immediate polarization of school shootings or any other tragic event, they're looking to create that divide so that people don't blame them and their side for that suffering. They want to point the finger rather than find a solution.
Okay, so I want to go back to something you said because I think it's important as a believer to understand something. You said they want to play the role of God.
That's correct.
Right. So eventually bipartisanship tips over the line of truth is what I heard you say, and on a number of issues that we've got to deal with. So it's not about necessarily coming together on those particulars at times, and that we've got to say, sorry, my truth is different from your truth.
There's only one truth.
Right.
Right. Well, and we're called to worship God.
Right.
And so to enable them to pass policies and force society to live under the notion that they are the gods, that's antithetical to Christianity. And we've reached that point.
Yeah. No.
So therefore, not saying something is being complacent in sin.
Yeah.
You can't sit on the sidelines anymore. 33% of Christians don't vote. Imagine how much better and how much more godly our society would govern itself if they were to engage.
Okay, I want to circle back to an idea, but I want to chase that one first a little bit more because, Elliot, I'm your father-in-law, you're my son-in-law, so we have a special relationship with each other, as well as you're a politician and I'm a pastor, right? So as we look at these issues, you're a generation, behind me. As you see young people today, and as they see some of these issues that are happening in the world. So just explain to the listeners, just take one topic, explain to the listeners hearing us today that might be from an older generation, how the younger generation doesn't see the separation between faith and state on whatever that issue is.
Right. Well, if you pick up the news and actually watch Fox, MSNBC, or whatever channel it is that your side is with, you're going to hear a lot of platitudes. And with some of those platitudes comes Christian white nationalism. It seems to be leveled against the right pretty hard. And the reason why it is because they recognize that there is a cultural tendency for conservatives to be Christian. I think it's somewhat closer to 80% of Democrats consider themselves non-religious. And so at some point, there is a clear line in the sand that Christianity and politics does have a tie in some way. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be 77% of America believing in God from a Christian vantage point in 1970. So we must have somewhere along the way gone really, really astray. And when that happened, there seemed to be an electoral decision made by the left to vilify and demonize Christianity. And you see it with the abortion topic. You see it with transgenderism. You see it with all of these issues that we're dealing with socially. These are social issues because it's rooted in that destruction of truth. And so our side just simply sees them as one and the same. If you are a Bible-believing Christian, you must also be a conservative. You must be pro-America as it was founded and the values that it was founded upon, and not just some subjective sense of we can change, we can throw away that old piece of paper that we call a constitution because it's no longer relevant for the day. Those things are not separable. We're only able to be governed by a moral and godly society, as John Adams had said back in the founding. Mm-hmm. And right now we have a governmental structure that's still built in Christianity with a non-Christian citizenry. And those two things are incompatible. And I think Charlie actually said that better than anybody else. So that's how we see it. That's how my generation views it. And there's a huge Christian revival going on right now in my generation because of that. I just think that they're done buying the notion that doing whatever you want and living kind of with a humanistic approach leads to happiness and joy. It doesn't. It still leaves a Jesus-sized hole in your heart.
Yeah, that's good because there's a lot of Christians, I think, that live a lifestyle very detached from their community, their church, the nation, because they want to keep those things separate, and then they get kind of perturbed that this younger generation is bringing some of those things together. Even if you notice the trend, as I see it on news media, social media, you can see that the worlds are getting blended together, which either we could protest and throw a big fit about,
right,
or we can lean into evangelistically and say, man, this is a huge opportunity, right? And then to navigate it really well. So A couple of things.
To that point, I want to expand on that. So politics is simply a reflection of the culture of the day, right? Mm-hmm. We elect leaders that resemble us.
Yeah, because it's a living organism.
Correct. Yeah. That's how democracies work, for better or worse. If you have good people within a culture that are believing good things, you're going to have good leaders. But once your society strays from that, it will then select leadership that governs just as lost as they do. And the only way to prevent that from happening is to be grounded as a society in that truth. And that only comes from a biblical perspective. So if you think about it kind of like a ladder, the highest rung on the ladder is God. The second rung would be people like yourself, who really do have the most influential and impactful just overall leaning on society.
You said it.
Right? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's true. And then below that is our politics. Mm-hmm. And I think for so long, the American church has avoided having this conversation and it refused to view politics and religion as somewhat inseparable. And for that, the church has fallen by the wayside, and they've kind of been irrelevant for quite some time. And it's people who are speaking that biblical truth with conviction. Those are the people that are seeing a massive spike in attendance from our generation.
I've noticed,
that's worth it.
I've noticed that too. I would definitely say that the churches that I notice that are spiking in attendance, in giving and engagement, are those that are willing to go there. Now, there's a few that go a little extreme for me.
Oh, for sure.
And we need to figure out, how far is too far,
right?
Kind of a thing. And I want to discuss that at some point. But it's fascinating to me as I travel the country. I've seen every degree on the spectrum with this. I've seen churches that won't engage, to churches that will. And it's always the ones that do and kind of dare to step into it. And I bring that up because, biblically, there were people that stepped into the square. They eventually had to step into the square. I mean, take Daniel. Daniel eventually said no, to the emperor at his time. I mean, I think of, Peter proclaiming Christ before the Sanhedrin in Acts 4. I think of Stephen and his martyrdom. I mean, he was stoned to death by religious officials.
Right. Jesus was.
Yeah. Wait, obviously,
so think about that.
I was getting there.
Sorry. I mean to take
Stay in your own lane.
Stay in your lane, man. You said it. I'm more important.
But I think it's fascinating because they all did, and Jesus. I think some people forget this, and I'm going to give you've been giving us some American history. Let me give you some biblical history. So I think a lot of people forget that at the time of Jesus's life, Rome had gone from a republic to an empire, which could be our future. Some people think it already is, but they're wrong. We still voted a
If
president.
they can say that out loud, then it's not, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. If they can say it out loud, it's not.
Without being killed.
Yeah, so... But, Rome eventually went from a republic to an empire. They had a ruler over them, and then those rulers got bad, and then Jesus was born into that. At that time that Jesus lived, the emperor of the day, the Caesar of the day, hand-selected the high priests that oversaw Jewish religion. Now, high priests were prayed in, essentially. They weren't dictated by an emperor. You think about that. So Rome had its grimy hands on the high priest of the day. Not only that, there were two high priests at that time. It shouldn't have happened either. Now you see the convoluted way that Rome had found its way into both the public square and into faith, and Jesus walked right into that and confronted.
He transcended it.
He did.
He is the only person capable of transcending politics.
Exactly.
And leading that revolution.
Yeah. And you could see that some of those other guys weren't handling that very well.
No.
They didn't know how to handle it, but he guided them through it. He gave his life for all of us, the planet, even the people that killed him, right? The people that conspired against him, his own race and religion, right? He gave his life for them and essentially saved us from the real problem, which is sin. I mean, that's the bottom line issue. The bottom line issue isn't just our politics, it's our sin.
And that's the one thing that we do have some bipartisan similarities in. We're all fallible. Yeah. We're all men.
Yeah.
And we sin.
Yeah.
No one side is perfect. Yeah. And we need to remember that. We need to stay grounded in that, though. And when you refuse to admit that and you start believing in your truth, I'm going to live my truth. We hear that often nowadays, right? When one side is embracing that and the other is trying to guide us back to something that resembles a nation under God, I think it's important to recognize that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've navigated a few pretty good topics.
Yeah, I think it's a good outline.
Yeah. So let's dive into the civility piece. Like, how do we do that? Because I'm going to be honest with you, before I even open up that question for you, we are still like in the first week after Charlie was assassinated. It's pretty, I think the air is palpable. It's pretty sensitive still. People are having a hard time processing still. And I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I wept when I heard that. And there are multiple times that I'm listening to the news, didn't matter what kind of news I was listening to, where I was just like, man, this is too much. Like, so.
It ate up my soul.
Right.
And I didn't expect it to initially. I knew Charlie, not, as like a personal one-on-one friend, but we'd had interactions together, and he was the reason I got involved in politics at all. Starting a Turning Point chapter, and your daughter starting one first, and then me needing to do the exact same.
You heard it here first. My daughter started a chapter first before my son-in-law did. Okay.
So when she complains about me being in politics, I can always point the finger back at her and be like, "You got me into this, babe."
Yeah. But okay, so he got you. I mean, it inspired you guys.
He fought for our entire generation to show us that we can be courageous as well and pick up the microphone and say something.
Okay, so that's where I want to go with this.
Yeah.
So let me back up just a little bit because I want to capture that emotion. So we're in this time of mourning.
Yes.
And people essentially, this is metaphor now, okay? People dance on his grave. They celebrate his death. All right, so we're trying to mourn, or some of us are trying to mourn. And you see that happen.
Yeah.
It's trying to elicit a non-civil response. And of course, we live in a country where you have the freedom to speak on those issues.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to kind of, here, I'm going to get back to these terms, we have to self-regulate and not self-censor. And now we got to figure out how we navigate through that, because I'm doing all these circle backs now. Let me say one more thing, and then I want to hear from you. It's this. My fear is, today is Monday. So we're recording this on Monday. I'm just going to say that because I don't know when I'm going to release it this week. But Thursday, right? Was it Thursday?
Thursday at noon.
Thursday at noon, he was assassinated, right? Or Wednesday? Maybe it was Wednesday.
Know.
Okay,
Feels
so
like a blur
it's a blur. So maybe it's Wednesday. I think I got to New York on Thursday night. So yeah, it would have been Wednesday noon. Thursday, I speak at that camp. Sunday comes. Okay, so we had Sunday this last week, and I heard a lot of churches at least use his name. At least use his name. And of course, you kind of see these trends of, if your pastor's not talking about it, walk out of the church. And I'm just going to be honest, I kind of agree with that. If you are going to ignore the issue, so let me get to my question. Let me keep circling back. But, a lot of pastors mentioned the issue, at least in brief,
right,
this Sunday, and I've listened to a few of them, and some of them did a very good job. But here's where I have a problem. If it's only going to be one weekend that you do this, then when we have the floodgates open to, stepping into this a little bit more and gaining some courage through the civility, even though we're going to be kind of persecuted or pushed away from mourning into anger and bitterness and just biting back. How do we do that, Elliot? You work in this square all the time.
Yeah, and Charlie was so amazing because he engaged in that dialogue and discourse with respect. He found a way to bring about politics that recognized human value despite differences. So much so that he would invite you to the front of the line if you disagreed with him. You were the first voice he wanted to talk to and actually have a discussion with. I mean, I've seen interactions and clips of them where he's talking with a transgender individual and saying, Jesus loves you too. You're not broken. I want to see you flourish, but I don't think that what you've been told is the right way to accomplish that. He was a very respectful individual. And for all of the kind of rewriting of history as to who he was, he showed that civil discourse and civil dialogue, being able to disagree while still being agreeable, that tactful nature is a good thing. And they shot him for it. Hard to have civility with that. And then not only did they shoot him, they had such a cheerful response. And these aren't fringe ideas. This isn't just the far left, small, tiny minority of people that were engaging in that disgusting behavior. It was mainstream. It was very mainstream, and it is right now. They immediately jumped on it as a gun issue. Maybe finally they'll recognize the need for gun control. Maybe, let's throw out thoughts and prayers and see if that, insults them. How insincere is that? And they're using prayer as a form of mockery in our time of grief. So civility, getting back to that word, civility can only occur if you do have that moral grounding in truth, like we said earlier. We don't. So instead, we have to win over the hearts and minds of the next generation and create a culture that is synonymous with truth so that we can be civil amongst each other despite our differences. Right now, we don't have that. So it's tough to have a really constructive dialogue with people who don't want to.
Okay, so I want to lean into this a lot because I think it's important for us as believers, because I'm a pastor, for us as believers to guide believers in a direction that isn't an extreme, but doesn't self-regulate, right? Like I don't want people out hurting people because of the things that we're talking about, and at the same time, I don't want people backing down anymore. Even saying "don't back down" sounds like the wrong posture.
Right, like we're not taking up arms here.
Yeah.
We're still engaging at
even though we're both packing heat right now.
Right. Have to be. But no, even looking back to June 14th, when Minnesota experienced a tragedy with our former speaker, Melissa Hortman, and John Hoffman and his wife Yvette being shot, and they survived, thank God. But Melissa and Mark, they tragically passed away, and we were grieving alongside our colleagues. Yes. We recognized the fact that humanity was taken, and God, God has a plan, but it didn't feel as if in that moment that was God's plan. Like, how would somebody do this? Why would they think that this is the way to change our government makeup? And we're still working through that. But I tried to be there for my colleagues. And many of those colleagues that I personally called picked up the phone and said, "Hey, how you doing? I just want to make sure that you know that we're thinking of you." And we're
okay, so here's what I hear you saying if I was to describe it in a pragmatic way. It would be, we're going to have good civil disagreements based upon God's truth, which is the greatest truth. And as we kind of work down the line, we're also going to care for the people on the other side of the aisle.
We're called to.
Yeah. Love our neighbor.
But then to now see them putting out statements saying his rhetoric led to his death. Yeah. That tells me that they would actually celebrate if I were killed, because I see a lot of the same value structures and similarities and beliefs as Charlie. So it really did kind of strike a chord with me, and I'm still working through that. I don't know how I'm going to engage with them. Yeah. And I think a lot of other people, just in everyday dialogue, friends, family, neighbors, acquaintances, they're probably severing some ties with folks because of their overall response.
Right. So even that statement, Charlie's rhetoric led to his death. There's part of that word rhetoric that essentially demonizes the truth. Speak. Right.
That leads to the self-censorship.
Yeah. And at the same time, Stephen in Acts chapter 7 spoke truth, and it led to his death. Does that make sense? Right. So
How did he do that?
He stood up before the Sanhedrin, spoke the truth, and they stoned him to death. And I would say I would just say this, is that the way that maybe the other side of the aisle is using the word rhetoric feels kind of bastardized to me, and they're demonizing that whole idea of rhetoric. At the same time, I would say, yeah, if you stand up for truth, you are going to be persecuted. In fact, I think Jesus was very clear that
That's what I was just looking at.
Man, if John 15:18, if the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. So Jesus won that one. Again, He wins every single time. And I think that's part of it, that we've got to be okay a little bit with that. Like, it's okay. We shouldn't masochistically seek out being hated by other people.
No. Yeah.
But it's okay if I speak the truth and the world does hate me.
It's natural for humans to, try to shy away from rejection. We all want to feel like we fit in, like we're accepted, we're not ostracized. But John 15:20, like you just described, says that, if they killed somebody who was perfect, died for our sins, if they killed him, that means that we're probably not going to have, quote unquote, easy lives either, and that we will be persecuted for believing what we believe. And we should do so willingly. We should actually embrace that and say, bring it on, because the goal is that when we die, all of hell rejoices that we're out of the fight. And nobody who, withholds saying the truth out of fear of being ostracized or demonized by somebody who does not wish them to be alive, perhaps, for believing what they believe, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, and we're doing Christ a disservice in helping bring about his values reflected through our politics. And so it's going to feel as if you're being attacked. And right now it does.
Yeah, well, and when I saw that scene on TV, it to me resembled a moment in the Bible. Instantly I saw it. So Paul walks into the Colosseum at Ephesus. All right. The Colosseum, you can still go to it today. Yeah. He was standing in the Colosseum. It's right there on the water. It's looking up the hill at the temple of Artemis or Diana, the temple of Diana, the multi-breasted fertility god. And he pronounces a truth against the god on the hill. That's what Charlie was essentially preparing to do on that day, except, Charlie had a sniper in the crowd, waiting and in wait. And if you remember the story, there was a big uproar in the Colosseum, and then people had to come in and kind of pull Paul away. Otherwise, he was going to be destroyed by the crowd. And I'm thinking, well, when I saw that event, I was thinking Paul the Apostle. And I'm not going to call Charlie Paul, okay? So anybody who's listening,
but recognizing a similarity or an analogy
there's a
biblical truth in today's world.
It's a real similarity. Yeah. And if Paul had courage to step into the public square, after many years of rereading the text, being educated, he was a master at debate. Think about that, the similarities are freaky. It blows my mind. But I think that what Paul understood too was that there was a lot of hope for the church in Ephesus if he just stood up and spoke.
Right, because it moves the Overton window as to what's allowed to be said.
Right.
If we're not allowed to say something, and everybody recognizes that under fear of a gun, the first guy who says it might inspire a lot more to say it as well. And if we as Christians, and Christians being the majority conservative party right now, if we stop self-censoring and we say that truth unabashedly and unwavering, with conviction, no matter where we are, whether it's a college campus full of folks who hate your guts and call you a fascist for believing what you believe, or amongst like-minded people, that's always the best case scenario, is just to speak truth. If you're ever wondering what to do in a hard situation, saying the truth is the best decision you can make. And I think Charlie did that, and he was killed for it.
Okay, so let's dive into. I want to dive into this a little bit. It's gonna take us a while to get through this. It's probably 15 or 20 more minutes of this, but I think this is really important. So, I think part of the reason that Christians aren't engaging the debate isn't just out of fear of what someone else is going to do. It's that they actually don't know the truth, right? And that's the beauty of Charlie was. He could walk. Okay, so not everybody really liked Charlie, obviously.
Of course.
and,
Yeah.
and, we only get clips of what he was doing on campuses. But I know this, that the people that get the most angry about what Charlie did forget that people walked up to that mic and chose to speak into it.
Correct.
And I watched Charlie mature in his faith. I never knew him personally, just so you know. I'm not.
But he's very public, so you can see that.
You
up
can
front
see him,
personal.
right? And I watched him mature, especially in his faith. And I would say in the last few years, he was soft, sharpest and softer at the same time. Like still pushed into it, but had a softer tone. Like wasn't just full of youthful energy and
I have to catch myself sometimes too.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, 100%. But he started this in his parents' garage at 18 with no money.
Yeah.
And look at the organization that he created, which is now being requested on 34,000 plus campuses across America.
Yeah. Okay, so
you can't do that without having some of that real hard passion, right?
Right.
But as he grew in his faith, you could see it reflected in the way that he connected interpersonally with people who disagreed with him. There was more of a willingness to get at their heart first and recognize shared humanity, and then say, here's why I believe this, and I think that you should too, for your own good, not because we're just looking to create a division there.
Yeah. So let's speak to that.
Yeah.
So I think that, Elliot, that a lot of people just don't know the truth, and they're scared. They're not just scared of other people; they're scared that they don't know it. And that's what I love about Charlie is he just went on this human experiment, right? Like he just put himself out there, and I really want to tell people that are listening today that we need to get sharper in our faith.
Yeah.
And we need to get into God's truth. And most people are just scrolling, death scrolling on
Doom scrolling all day.
All day. Doom scrolling, that's the right term. God,
Right.
yeah, I'm so old.
That's
Okay,
right.
so but they're doom scrolling on the phone and they're just taking in all this information and it's all partial information, spun truth.
Yeah.
And they're not in God's truth. And, I did watch Charlie mature, but as he did, I think what was so incredible about it was you could tell that his biblical knowledge was growing.
Oh, 100%.
And I was like, dude, this is stuff that I would say 90% of pastors don't even know. And, I think the encouragement right now is that we want people to be in churches today, but if churches aren't going to lean into it, then, and lean into the truth and engage in really studying the truth and being able to figure out how to bring our faith into the marketplace, into the public square, that we got all kinds of problems.
100%. And I think, we have something that no other generation of humans has ever had, all of the knowledge of the world at our fingertips at all times of the day. We know every tragedy about 10 seconds after it occurs, right? And we saw it with Twitter on the day of Charlie's passing. Having that without first having God as your guiding light, it's going to lead to a mental health crisis that we now see today. And so without having a strong church that is also founded in deep biblical understanding, which I was seeking out in the moments following his death. I wanted to dive into Scripture and try to find an answer. And sometimes I don't always do that, especially in politics. You're trying to ask somebody how to get something done.
We're going to change that right here.
Right. But see, that's why I said that it's more important in your role to help change politics than a politician will ever be able to change the culture.
Okay, and that's why I'm sitting here with you, is I really feel like as your father-in-law that I should be discipling you in that truth, guiding you the way. That's why I'm sitting with you right now today. I don't know how long we'll continue doing this, but we'll do it as long as necessary. There's probably going to be political issues for a long time. I'm just guessing.
Right, yeah. Seems like we're on a 10-hour news cycle.
Yeah, so right, exactly.
Get back at it tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
But what I have found fascinating, even when I listened to his wife speak on that video, after his death, dude, talk about crying at Charlie's death, listening to his wife speak. Okay, so I learned something. And I learned that he was a big time family man. And I did not know that. That's something kind of behind the curtain that you can't see. But I'll give people an example of what I mean by understanding truth. Okay, so I think there's a lot of men and women out there today that feel a little unsure of themselves surrounding the idea of truth because they're not in the truth. But here's one way for sure Charlie was in the truth. Yeah. He understood the value of a believing family.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just take that one thing. Let's die on that one hill for just a few minutes, all right? If we could take our theology and move it into our, practice in everyday life, just be obedient with it. One of the social spheres that we live in is our family.
Yeah. It's the first social sphere.
Yeah, I mean, it's super important. Like, we should be engaging that, leading that. Deuteronomy 6 for me is, I think, easily one of the most important texts in all of the Old Testament that I, as a father, have a responsibility to teach and to impart wisdom, not only to love God, but to love my family and teach them as they go along the way, as they get up, as they lie down, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Well, and watching Erica in those moments too, you could tell that occurred within Charlie's own household, right?
Oh, dude.
I mean, that's obvious. Why I know that they're going to be okay in the long haul. They're going to grieve, and we don't know the emotional pain, trauma, and suffering that they're going through right now, having lost a husband and a dad to two young, beautiful kids. Yeah. They don't have their dad anymore.
Yeah, it's humbling.
The daughter ran towards Charlie after he was shot, saying, because she was scared of the noise. Mm-hmm. And people cheered that. Mm. I mean, they're going to be okay because they have Christ as their center point. Mm-hmm.
But here, yeah, exactly. And, the brokenness we see in the family today, mm-hmm. and I would even say there are people out there that want to destroy the family unit, cease to be a part of it, talk bad to it, and even bastardize the name patriarch, right? But it's a patriarch was lost from a family this week. But it happens all the time. But there are patriarchs not leading their family spiritually today. And I would say this to you as a father and as a husband, you have a responsibility to lead at home. And, how do we live out our faith in politics? It all begins with that family unit. And that's why I was so moved by it's Erica, right? Her name is Erica. I was so moved by her video because I heard about a man who was a patriarch. He was a spiritual leader of his home. It wasn't just about him going out there and making a name for himself. His first responsibility, if I heard Erica right, was to ask every day, how can I be better?
How can I serve you?
How can I be better as a husband, as a father? And I'm like, how can I serve you as a husband? I'm like, whoa.
It's a lot different from the average male, I think, in a relationship who's asking, how can I not get nagged on today?
Yeah,
right?
That's true, yeah.
I mean, being a spiritual leader of your household is the first step into being, loved by your spouse and loved by your children, respected by.
Or making your first stop at the bar on the way home with your buds. Or, lots of time on extracurricular activities, but not a lot of time invested in the family. I learned this lesson a long time ago, Elliot. I'm going to give it to you, but I think it's easy for us as men to kind of get absorbed into work. It's easy for me to get absorbed into ministry. It's going to be really easy for you to get absorbed into politics because there's all kinds of things to do, right? But I really got to turn on 100% when I get home. And I used to say this because it really helped me. When I walk in the door, I got to give my family, my children, and my wife 100% of who I am. I can't give them the leftover one. It's just not going to work. Not only that, I had to really learn what it meant to be a patriarch in a home because I didn't have a patriarch in my home.
Right.
I went through two dads. I had a bio dad and a stepdad, and then my grandfather stepped in when I was 15 and parented me, right? But here, and then he died when he was 20. So I didn't have that consistent voice, that patriarch in my life to model to me what that's supposed to look like, but that doesn't relieve me of the responsibility of doing it. Deuteronomy 6 is clear. I've been given a mandate to do this, and that's what I loved about Charlie. At least afterwards, when I heard his story, even more from his wife, I'm like, well, here's a guy who actually led in the first place that he needs to lead.
Yeah.
Not just himself, but his family. And he pressed into it. And man, I would say to people listening today, that's exactly where we need to start. We need to start by speaking truth to our family. Because, man, Elliot, there are families being ripped apart
every day
by all this ideology.
88% of kids under the age of 12 who are black, brown, disadvantaged, underserved communities, whatever you want to reference, they will never know a father figure in their home. Think of that. And it was an inverse in 1960. That's sad. And it's leading to so much of the brokenness and the lost feeling that youth are going through. And they turn to crime, they turn to drugs, they turn to addiction, they turn into monsters because nobody was their guiding light. And Charlie definitely was one. And for you to come out as, and I'm not blowing smoke, and please don't rub my nose in it later, but for you to be as good of a dad as you have been, and as good of a husband, despite the fact that you never saw it.
You heard it here first, kids.
I can take it back. No, for you to, really lean into that and make that your sole focus, that's why you're able to also disciple men, right? Because you recognize how important it is. And we have to first, as a society, recognize that there's a lot of brokenness within our own homes. And how dare you try to lead a city if you can't bring peace to your own family?
Yeah, well, that's biblical. That's 1 Timothy qualifications of elders. If a man can't manage his own home, what business does he have managing the bigger family of God, right? It's a very simple principle, but we as people, we have to learn this. And Elliot, I'm just going to say this. I've never been a perfect father. Okay. I've never been a perfect father, but I've leaned into it. And here's the catch to it all. I am a child of the Father, whom I am pointing my children and my wife to anyway. If I'm not as a patriarch leading my kids to the Father, my wife to the Father, then I've really missed the point altogether. It's not about me being a hero dad. It's about letting God be the hero of the story. He is anyway, and his son being my Lord and Savior, rescuing me from my sin so I can have that restored relationship with the Father. There's the gospel right there.
So we're shepherding our children to Christ.
We are shepherding them. That's a good way to say it. Good job, dude. I'm going to borrow that. Yeah. We're shepherding them to Christ, right, to the hero. And once I really learned that in my relationship with my family, it alleviated me of all the burden of trying to be the perfect dad.
Right.
And man, when you start to see it, you really enjoy the experience of being a patriarch. I mean, when your child was born, Everett, I started to think about my role differently. I'm like, okay, here I am, Pops, this guy.
VPaw.
No,
that's what
it's not V. No,
it's going to sound like a Teletubby. It's a perfect nickname for
He's trying VPaw. It's Pops.
I'm going to get him to do it.
I'm going to We'll see.
You've given me some crap.
I'm going to give him sugar that goes with it.
And loud toys that keep us up at
toys and money. And anyway, so I think that there's beauty in that. And this is where we start to live out truth in the public square. It begins with our life, with our family. And I'm just going to let you know, as a pastor, I see so many families ripped apart by politics today. They're being ripped apart. There are people listening right now whose families have been destroyed, don't even get together anymore, communicate. So I know fathers and grandfathers who are not allowed to see their children since COVID because of their conservative beliefs.
8 out of 10 individuals, according to a recent, I think it was HuffPost survey, showed that they've cut out either a close friend or family member because of politics. That means that it's replaced religion. You know how it said it?
Right.
8 in 10 people in 1970 that said that they were religious. Well, now it's politics is driving their religion. Politics is their religion. So if we don't first have a strong faith-based household that is grounded in that truth, then fighting for it in the public square is not going to happen. You're not going to be good at it. You're not going to. There's no need for it. Sorry, you're also part of the problem. Then you're just noise. You're just more chaos, more division, without rectifying that. And so I think getting to your point, being a good father and looking at Charlie and knowing that he was a good dad. It made me hug Everett a little bit tighter that night.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And, I thought about you on that day too, just like what you're doing in the political arena and how you're speaking out. And while, there's been moments I thought, we got to get Elliot out of this.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's like, no, this is exactly where we're supposed to be. At least learning how to speak into it, and not being stupid, but being courageous, learning how to be civil, but stand for
And it's
truth.
not about us. That's the thing, is politicians, they're really, really good at being egotistical, narcissistic maniacs. In fact, I think if you poll everybody, they probably agree with you, left or right, who's listening to this.
Exactly.
But when you have politicians who don't believe that they are the center of the world, but rather God is, that's when they do real good work. And unfortunately, a lot of those people are like not engaging in politics at all. They're like, it's too gross. It's filled with too many bad people who are spiritually broken. And that's what's leading to compounding generations of spiritual brokenness within our own public sphere. I've even heard it before, Christians who say, I don't vote because neither of them is Jesus, neither of the candidates that I could vote for. And what that's ultimately doing is checking out of the game, not engaging in the one move amongst many, but one really easy big move as to how you can bring more God to your society and have that get passed down to next generations, right? So we have to engage in this. We have to talk about it, and I think that that's what this podcast might be a start to, getting those two sides, that separation of church and state, back to the table, and at least discussing how we view things that occur on a day-to-day basis, whether it's the Charlie Kirk issue or something that we don't even know about yet.
Yeah.
People don't know how to feel about it. They don't know how to go forward. They don't know how to move after that happens, but they know that their heart aches. And their heart aches because we're not referencing God through our decision-making. So I'm going to try to center myself in that even more. I'm going to keep asking you questions. That's my big thing, and the takeaway that I have kind of come to after Charlie's passing. Look to the Bible before looking to myself for an answer. And so hopefully we can get
That's
others
good.
thinking that way too.
That's a great confession. From my standpoint, I hope that we can continue the conversation, Elliot, because I really feel compelled to be even more courageous. I've always been a pretty faith-filled, trusting, put myself out there kind of guy. But after, this is all fresh, right? Last Wednesday, Thursday night, speaking on that stage and addressing it, I just felt like God had laid something on my heart that I need to step into it more and guide people through the experience. Obviously, I do this through the Bible thing with Project 23, my dailies, a chapter a week, and then I, do a chapter summary at the end of the week.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep working through the Bible, but my hope is that our dialogues will empower people around how to think about it, how to feel. We can even disciple them, and even at the end that we can evangelize a younger generation. And what I mean by this is truly evangelize them, because us guys that are older, like my age and older, we're going to age out and find ourselves very distant from the next generation if we don't lean into it.
Yeah, if you look at our current politics, referenced in that exact analogy, we have people who don't know where the space bar is that are writing pieces of legislation that deal with AI. It's pretty far removed. But if we pass down the values or the overall knowledge of how to deal with issues of the day through a Christian perspective, I think that's going to allow the next generation to tackle those issues and still come out on top, right? I think suicidality and our fall away from Christianity are synonymous right now. I think the brokenness is all synonymous. Turning back towards God as the guiding light, just like Judges, which you're currently going through.
Yeah, exactly.
The second that we turn back towards God, our society sees a profound, robust increase in happiness and overall meaning. And people are without a lot of meaning right now.
Yeah, well, and I'm reading Judges right now, and I'm like felt emboldened by it because you have this. Basically, what you see in Judges is you see the sin cycle kind of spin.
Yeah.
Where the people come back to God as a nation, then they fall away, back to God, fall away, back to God, fall away. It just repeats over and over again. But the hope is that every once in a while there's a judge. A tribal leader is what it was. A tribal leader who steps in, who does a few great things in a moment in time, and then, the nation has a time of peace. And I think what I want to do with this time, you and me talking, is to empower people to understand how they can step up in their day. And it's not just one. It's a nation full of people, and I'm hoping it's actually some young people that can figure out, because there are some articulate young people today out there, like yourself, by the way.
I don't know about that.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
is. You are definitely one of them that just need to push into it a little bit and lean into it. And you're going to make some mistakes, Elliot.
Of course.
But we just need to get over that.
Don't refrain from doing something worth doing because you could fail.
I know.
Right?
And if we could push through that, I wonder if, and I know this is true, but I think, if you go back and watch old Charlie and compare it to, what was new Charlie, you would see an evolution of his ability, his presence, how he articulated himself, making fewer mistakes. And guess what? That's what's going to happen. We're going to make a little bit of a mess along the way. We apologize for it. We push through it. And we get better, and
we can have civility in those.
We can have civility,
right?
How we handle ourselves, and
when we make those mistakes,
right. But we can't be quiet right now. We can't allow, a time of mourning to push us into too much self-centered censorship. There's that word. It's hard to say, dude.
Censorship.
Self-censorship. So that we self-regulate ourselves out of the conversation. That's exactly how we got
iced off, and we're like two different tribes that don't interact with each other, right? But at the end of the day, this is still a nation, and we are all comprised of that nation.
We are.
So we have to figure out some way to have that discourse, right? Otherwise, might as well break away and have two. And a lot of people are worried that that's where it's going to lead to if we don't figure out what that next step is.
If we don't do stuff like this.
Right. Well, and like you said about
judges.
Yes. Hopefully someday we have somebody sitting across from us here that doesn't agree with us, and we're able to do so civilly. But going back to judges, like you said, weak men make hard times. Hard times make strong men make good times. I think that's kind of the cycle of judges as well. And right now we're in a lot of hard times. Mm-hmm. And this can either create strong men or it can create hate-filled, vengeful, spiteful men. And those people don't actually rebuild or reform a society back to what its former glory was. They tear down and rule over ashes. We're hoping that people want to engage in this dialogue because they see an opportunity to do something themselves, to have a profound impact on their culture, on their community, on their state, on their nation. Mm-hmm. And eventually that's going to get handed down to the next generation. It's time that they step up and engage because the next generation is worth fighting for.
Yeah, that's good. We're going to end right there, in fact, because I think we've taken a kind of just so everybody knows, we didn't have a big format for this. Actually, we just kind of had a conversation around a few topics that we knew we wanted to discuss. So thanks for listening today. Elliot, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate you. Appreciate what you do for our state here, Minnesota, but also appreciate having you as a son.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty awesome having you as a father-in-law where I can just shoot over a text and say, hey, what do you think about this biblical interpretation? Or what's this? How do you kind of wrestle with these two issues? And I ask it so often, I can't even think.
Well, I can do it with you too. I can say, where did we come up with this crazy idea? It's a bill, like.
And I'm like, I don't even know, man. It's horrible.
I could ask you about the circus, right, at the Capitol.
But the circus needs to be dictated through Christ again.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you engaging in this dialogue and trying to open up that space for that unseparation of church and state.
That's good. All right. Let me pray, and then we'll dial it out.
Let's do it, man.
So, God, thank you for this time. Thank you for friends. We pray for all those people listening today that they would step in to the arena, that they would be less timid, more courageous, still civil, but stand on truth. God, engage even if it costs them something. And God, we're grateful for your Son who did just that. How cool is that? In his name we pray. Amen. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening today. If you're out there, I'm Vince Miller. This was Elliot Angen with me. And as always, live all in for him who lived all in for you.